So Zach's going to give an overview of this application and then talk a little bit about what fields and information are being collected and how we keep track of what counties are updating and participating. And then we'll just have time for questions and see how this connects to our work and how we might leverage it for other projects. So take it away, Zach.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
All right. And am I sharing the screen with the...
Yep.
Okay. So actually most of you in this meeting are probably familiar with this app that we started, I want to say about 4 years ago. Um, it's again, as Stacy mentioned, it was created to help with our workflow of working with different counties, and it went from, originally emails and sharing attached files to the first version of this app. And then a few months ago, there were a lot of things we learned over the past few years that we wanted to improve different functionality. And so we finally just went around and did it. And so we just literally Friday, we're doing final testing on the back end of the automation part. And I just sent emails just before this meeting to the first group of counties asking them to review their data with this version of the app. So all that to say, it may look familiar because in many ways it's very similar in terms of the layout, um, but there are some differences. So what we're looking at is what we consider uh, a part of the critical infrastructure we use for the hazard mitigation plans or in hazard mitigation planning. And I don't know if it's officially FEMA calls this or we called it um, essential facilities. You don't need to like remember that term, but there's more critical infrastructure that we do use in our plans that is not at all in this application. So the groups of critical infrastructure that we are asking local officials to review include emergency facilities. So we have EMS, EOC, fire, and law enforcement. And then we have healthcare facilities. And you could see assisted living, boarding care home, dialysis, hospice, hospitals, multi-use nursing homes, and supervised living. And then we have schools and shelters, schools broken into post-secondary and then K through 12. Um, Again, how we came up with these categories even is really very hazard mitigation specific and kind of um, FEMA loose guidance. They don't like to nail down this is exactly what critical infrastructure means because every community kind of defines it differently. But over the years, it's kind of this is what we've been uh, what has evolved through our workflow and feedback from communities. Um, and then there's another tab, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's not, it's just a way for users to actually add missing facilities. So essentially, um, there is an email goes out to the local official usually for this purpose. I just sent it to 6 different counties, and I included the emergency managers. They were kind of the point person, and then if I know or if I have a contact for the GIS individual at that jurisdiction, I'll also include them on the email. And basically explaining this is an app that we would like you to use to review and correct the data that we are going to use in your plan. Um, and there's a little information about if they, want to understand how to use it. I think it's pretty intuitive though. Now, what you're looking at is not brand new data. It's not 100% like every point is the most recent taken from a state or federal database. What we did was for a new baseline, we looked at the past few years of data and we looked to see, okay, if a county has edited any record in these different categories, then we believe that they have reviewed all of the records in that category, and therefore we are going to say that that is the most current official data for. So, for example, if Aiken County reviewed one of their EMS records, then we are saying then both of them are current. But if Aiken County didn't review any fire station record, then we are going to say we are replacing all the fire station records with the most current federal data. Because one of the other things is, so what you're looking at is a subset of data that's been reviewed at some point within the past 4 years or brand new data. So it's been either reviewed by local officials over the past 4 years, or it's data that we just grabbed like 2 weeks ago from either a federal or state database. These federal and state databases that we're using, um, so it depends on the facility or the type of data. So if it is a fire station, local law enforcement, or EOC, we are still using HIFLD. If it's an EMS, we are using Minnesota Emergency Medical Service Regulatory Board. All health facilities come from MDH's healthcare directory database, and then schools and shelters are also from HIFLD. So the actual use, county again is just asked to look at their jurisdiction. And so selecting their jurisdiction, they could select adjacent jurisdictions because we understand sometimes, it's not always super clean. And so there's multi-selects an option. And then they are asked to, again, review all of their records. So they could actually download at any point locally to like a CSV, whatever the filtered view is the download that they're going to receive. And they can do that for whatever reasons. Often we found users like to track because they don't do it all in one sitting. So they they find it easy if they have some way of tracking what they've reviewed as they go. And so the filtering capability is not only by jurisdiction, but it's also then they could specifically look at one type of data. And yeah, selecting the actual point is going to filter to the actual record. The records are really what contain all of the information, the attribute information that we are well, you'll see in a second everything we're gathering, but we're showing them on the front end is what we really are interested in them checking to see if it's accurate, which is just really address and if there is an official ID is what we're calling it, then that's going to be listed as well. And if there is some need for an update, then selecting this record needs to be updated is going to bring them to a survey, which is very similar to what we had before, asking if it needs to be completely deleted from the database or simply updated. And they would submit that information and then actually go ahead and submit update. And I could do it now. Well, yeah, well, sure. I'm just going to do it now. It's actually live, so I don't want to make too much mess. But what it looks like is this is one of the changes we've done. Before, people would often forget what they've just even recently reviewed and submitted. And so we wanted to give them some type of feedback right away. And so now when a user submits a delete or anything, they're going to see a symbol. Now, it's not actually reflected in the database yet. The database, there's scripts that run once a night to actually look to see if things are pending to be update or like edits that are pending or missing records that are pending, and then it actually will update the database. But this is just an immediate um, indicator saying, hey, uh, there is something that has been edited and it's pending to be processed. And so that's one of the things that we just recently did. Um, and let's see. So yeah, users simply go through and review all the facilities in their jurisdiction. And what's nice is they could share this around. You don't need to understand any, if you don't want to, GIS at all. It's supposed to be an intuitive, easy front end interface that anyone can work with. And that's the point, is the people that are using this are the ones that are the officials kind of overseeing uh, you know, the assets of that category in their communities.
Zach, can I stop you for just a
Yes,
second?
of
I
course.
just want to see if there's any questions
Yeah.
right now. Anybody have any questions? Um, I was wondering if you could explain, so how will we know, say, 6 months from now, how will we be able to identify what changes were made in a county? Like, will we have a record um, that something was deleted and by
Mm-hmm.
whom?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good point. So nothing is ever actually deleted. So what you're seeing here on is the what we're just calling the database. And so when there is a facility that is edited or deleted, that record that was updated, whether it was deleted so no one can see it on the front end, or some change happened, whether it's a location movement or an attribute change and it was replaced, um, the original record is always considered deleted, we call it. It's just hidden. So the layers that are on the front end are filtered. So every record that doesn't have a value of one in the deleted field is showing. And so spatial, can look and see how many records were edited or deleted, or whatever specifically we're interested in looking at, um, by just looking at the layer in the back and then applying whatever queries we're interested in looking at. Now, um, we have talked about having nicer like a dashboard that actually is aggregating like the summary of changes. That's not something that exists at the moment, but like more administratively, it's a common question of like right now it'd be easy to get a count of how many records did Aiken County update or delete, and whether that's, completely removed from the database or updated and change some record. We can get counts quickly now, but if we wanted to actually see, well, how many of them actually had a lat long change, and visualize maybe even that. We've talked about having some dashboard that was for internal uses to like see those summaries, which we can do. It's set up like it's fairly easy to capture all that, but we just haven't built that. Is that helpful, Stacy? Did
Yeah,
that answer your
yeah,
question? Okay.
that's helpful. Thank you. That's what I wanted you to explain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
Um,
any other?
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask if there's any other questions at the moment.
I've got one for you.
Sure.
I'm not sure I followed the process on updating data into the system. You commented that if someone hasn't updated their information, you will load over the high field information. that is maybe more current. And what I'm wondering is, I'm not, I don't know if I've got this conceptualized right, but it seems
Sure.
like to me you could be creating a self-reinforcing loop. If there's bad high field data to begin with,
Mhm.
it simply is again vetting the high field data that the state at some point in this process is going to begin doing outreach to Highfield to let them know that we've got, if you will, endorsed state data layers. Do you see what I'm suggesting there? And it would seem to me that you would almost, and you probably already have this, I just didn't understand it, that you might have some sort of a checkoff thing that indicates somebody has come in, looked at their data, validated their data as being good, and then clicked, I've reviewed my data and it's good.
Yep. Yes. So I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So when we start with data that, you know, we know that there's problems. Highfield has problems, but we started with Highfield with a number of the different categories because we thought it's the best that we could find that we know is going to be improved by local officials that are going to be giving feedback. And so what I meant by re so one of the other benefits of this new version of data is what do we do when we ask a jurisdiction to review their data and they just don't do it? Does that mean that there really was nothing wrong, which is surprising because it's probably from Highfield, and so we don't really trust that? Or does it, or let's say they review it and then in 5 years or however long, we're like, is it still good? Or is it like we wanted a way to uh we know that there's gonna be jurisdictions that simply don't review everything uh for whatever reason. They don't have time or they do it quickly.
Sure.
And so we just wanted to be able to uh identify records not on an individual level, because we do have a way of when someone edits and does something to a record, there's a date stamp of when they did it. So we have that now. That didn't really exist well before. So we didn't have a great way of keeping track of that. So moving forward, we now know exactly the date that a record was touched by a local official. But we know that there's still going to be these remaining old source records that maybe they're fine, and that's why they didn't touch it. Or maybe they just didn't have time. And so um, right now, the best thing that we're doing, is we're identifying categories of, well, now we could actually do it at the record level. Uh, and we don't really have a defined like time frame of when we decide, you know what, there's too much time that's passed. The default data might be better in today than it was 3 years ago when we originally grabbed it. So we're replacing everything that hasn't been touched. And
Okay.
so we don't have a perfect way because we don't have a way of, other than at a high level, the community's like, yes, I've reviewed all of police stations. They don't have to actually on every record touch it because we don't want to have a very onerous so maybe we do a date stamp on those records for them because they verified, like, okay, well, they said on this date that they've looked at everything. But right now, there's only a date stamp that happens when there is a change.
Okay, just a couple other ideas that came over from
Sure.
another utilities group. Visually, there might be a way to identify whether or not a particular item has been validated within a certain period of time, like maybe an X through the circle, or some other indication in how something looks. And the other thing
Hmm.
I'm wondering about that you might want to consider for maintenance purposes, just like the state sends out ticklers for, like, if you haven't updated your LLC filing or your corporate registration, they'll send something out like 6 months away, 3 months away, and then the month before. Is there been any thought of trying to build something like that into the system so that it triggers the idea
Hmm.
that, hey, your data is getting stale in here. You might
Yeah.
think about coming in here and updating it.
No, this is a great, I mean, I feel like this conversation is generating as we talk ideas of, proactively, uh, in short, no, but I feel it is a part of the evolution of this that
Sure.
we have to build in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Steve, and if I can add on to that, Steve, I think this is something that if the fire um and law enforcement layers are endorsed as best available and use spatial is the steward of those data sets, then we would do something like that. But right now, I'm not sure how we would just be sending out this to every single county and just telling them to update it. I mean, they get all kinds of requests from HSEM and from other people to update their critical infrastructure. So I don't think we have any weight unless we're working on their hazard mitigation plan. And that's how we've been able to do this.
Yeah, and again, that's really all I was suggesting. You know, it's sort of a two branch thing here. On the one hand, you're doing this project for the mitigation, and what we're seeing is the mitigation approach and trying to draw ideas for what we might be able to do at the state level. But I mean, I would think also within the mitigation thing, the tickler for the organizations that are currently in here would be something of value. That's all.
Hmm.
Thanks.
This is Matt Goodman. Can you guys remind me and anyone else on the call how often, what's the frequency that your average county would be basically like redoing their hazard mitigation plan and needing to review all of these? What kind of frequency would that typically happen at?
Every 5 years is when theoretically, if we worked with a county that continued using Spatial as a service to update their plans, that happens every 5 years. So that's why I say every 5 years. Stacy, do you have a different response?
No, that's correct. We did reach out to a few others, like the metro counties who we know they do a lot of their planning in-house, but during the when we updated the state hazard mitigation plan, we also reached out to the metro counties and a few others to just let them know we were updating this data set for the state hazard mitigation plan. Um, but yeah, it's on a 5-year cycle for the counties.
Other questions?
Zach, Megan had a question about the Department of Transportation schools data, and I know we've gone back and forth and back and
Mm,
forth on this,
yeah.
and wondering why we're using Highfield.
Well,
Um,
no, it's a good question. I don't know. Is the Department of Transportation the one that's in the Geospatial Commons
Department of
or
Education.
Education? Yeah. Why did I say
Yeah, so
transportation? That would be weird.
that would be weird.
Yes. So
There's a school layer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did. Okay. So we originally were wanting to use that. And to be honest, we found it to be very difficult to parse out truly the schools. And maybe it was my lack of understanding of, I just remember being extremely, uh, not, it was confusing because of, I think it was like libraries and administrative, like school buildings, but weren't really the actual schools where the kids were. It was just a very difficult, data set to just like, I just want the schools, like where the kids are. And, it was really good in other ways, but that was kind of at the heart of why we just decided let's start with Highfield because it just seemed more straightforward. Now, maybe it's not. I'm sure it's not as good, but I think that yeah, then the more we understand. Well, so that's that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Stacy or Megan, if you have further questions about that. But I kind of have other things in my mind. I don't want to go too far
Yeah.
before.
Well, I know Mike Delbo at MD's worked on this a bit to specifically help us with this problem. Um, and there is a layer now that is building that is just public school buildings, which is great because it's just the building, but then the problem is it doesn't have that ID that we need. That's what I
Does it
recall
not?
it.
Okay, so I couldn't. There were, I think, a few things. So yeah, you're referring to the NCES ID.
Yeah.
Um, okay, that might be true. Yes, but also, isn't it true that's just public, not private
Right. And
schools?
then that was the other thing is that it's just public schools. And so we still need a
Right.
source for private schools and places of higher education.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, hopefully this doesn't come off as sounding bad, but I was I was kind of thinking it was way easier to start with kind of this, you know, Highfield even also separates private, public, post-secondary. Uh, and knowing that, well, people they're going to be editing and updating this. I'm just starting with this, knowing that I think it's pretty good. And the nature of this is it's going to be updated by local officials. So I just thought it's easier for me anyway right now to start with these three data sets that are very easy to understand and have corrections be made by local officials than try to understand that one that's on the geospatial commons. And I really wanted to. I spent quite a bit of time trying to make it work, but it was becoming too difficult.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so this is all connected to, oh, and I guess I didn't really show when there is a facility that doesn't exist, this is where the user would go in and submit the facility that's missing. And yeah, some things are unique to our internal, like I'm trying to remember why we did some, like, well, I'm trying to think, like healthcare. If you select a healthcare facility, then the user has to select what type of healthcare facility it is. And this is very much MDH specific. And that's another challenge. MDH, the database there can be challenging to understand. And it's a concern that I still have that users won't fully know the health facility type. Um, we do give them the resources when they're updating or adding a health facility type to figure out what that is. Um, it's a constant balance of we don't want to overburden local officials, but at the same time, we are really interested in keeping our data like there's things we want to know and we need to know, especially if we're going to be feeding it back, if that's eventually a goal to, as you know, to the source of MDH or some other curator of a specific critical infrastructure type. Um, I didn't show this yet, but this is not done in that it's not live yet, but this is going to be the public version of the app. So there is a public version that exists now, and it's specifically on the Geospatial Commons for the fire station data set and the law enforcement data set. So on the Commons is still the old data and the old app. So I was working, or I emailed Megan last week because I know we have to update this now with the new. Um, and so the front end of the public facing app, it exists in the metadata and it explains to the user if they find an error that they could update it through the application. Again, this is the old version. But basically, what that means is things are gathered by the public, but it's not automatically updating the database. We will reach out to the local official of that jurisdiction with, hey, there's an edit that came through from the public. Uh, and ultimately, it's the local official that decides whether to accept it, not accept it, or address it themselves if it's kind, you know. So it doesn't automatically update the data though. So but this will, when it's done, be what is replacing this. So other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So I heard that the plans for the counties are created every 5 years, the emergency plans. Um, how often is the data refreshed? Sorry if I missed that.
No, you didn't. I don't think I actually maybe answered Matt's. I don't know if he asked that question too. I didn't answer that. I mean, so the data, we proactively reach out to counties only, we have been only when we're under contract with them and like, okay, we're going to be doing their plan. We need to like make sure the critical infrastructure data we have for them is updated. Or we recently did the state of Minnesota. So there were a number of counties we had just recently worked with that were they heard from us again. Or if it was super recent, we just didn't bother to ask them to review it again. But there's not we haven't established uh a frequency of beyond that's outside of our working as we work with jurisdictions of asking them to review and update their data. Now that might change, but at this point, it really has been just as we are under contract with them. So
Does
it's,
Megan mean the base data though? Or what did you mean,
oh,
Megan?
sorry, maybe I misunderstood
The
you.
data shown here on the map.
So this will be updated every day.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there are scripts behind the scenes. So this is the actual layer
Yeah.
that look to see, is there anything that was submitted through a survey as an edit, a delete, or an addition that needs to be addressed? And
Yeah.
every night it runs and it looks for those and then it does what it needs to.
Got it.
So Zach, if some particular county out there does not contract with Spatial and they haven't looked at their data here
Yeah.
in 8 years,
Yeah.
would at some point would you pull in new high-field source data or some whatever the source is from?
Yeah, definitely. And we have to like Spatial has to figure out what are we doing? Because we just did work with the state, so we did reach out to every county recently. Um, but yeah, we've reset up the the schema in a way to better address and track that because I believe I don't want to speak for Stacy or Spatial, but I believe moving forward we do want to try to be more intentional on some type of a regular schedule. Now, and I don't know what that means with jurisdictions that we haven't been working with. If it is simply, well, we're just going to grab the most recent federal HIFL data or MDH data and replace it all. Because theoretically, it's probably better than 5 years ago or whatever the time's been. But we don't have a clear plan or what that we just that's kind of where we're at. We have to kind of figure out what exactly is that going to look like. Because we've made it easy now. We've made it more scripts that just grab data from sources and uh, it's quite automated in the back. So it's not difficult. It's just more we don't want to uh, when is it that maybe a local official edit is so old and we're wondering if federal data is even better than that old. Now I'm thinking like way down the road, but like there it gets I think it could get a little complicated of if you're automatically just updating things, how do you know if you're doing if the updates you're making are actually improving or hurting? So anyway,
Zach, could you talk a little bit about the vetting process of
yeah,
data that's put in?
it's a good question. So we never have required people to log in with this. And that's because I think that there would be too many barriers. It's already challenging enough to ask them, everyone, to just do this. And a lot of people may not have ArcGIS Online. It would just creating logins gets, I feel, it can be complicated and deterring. But we did add requirements for people to add their information of who they are and how to contact them when they are submitting an edit or anything. So before we didn't have this, and it was very much um, uh, we we put a lot of thought into this. Do we want to make this required? Do we want to make it optional? We don't want to be too onerous, but we're starting with, if someone is updating the database, we need to know who it is. And so now we are starting to track that through the survey with their name, email, and what their jurisdiction is. Um, so yeah, that's really what we're doing right now. And if worst case, if there was some malicious person that came in and was like trying to do bad things, you can't, it's easy for us to recover things because nothing's ever deleted. It's just hidden. So on the back end, or if there's a big mistakes made, it's easy for us to go back and bring back records that shouldn't have been removed or edits that shouldn't have been made.
Okay, Mike, I guess the follow-on question would be then, in your process, before it goes into the database, is there any level of review? Like you wake up in the
Mhm.
morning, you come into the office, oh, 3 changes have been submitted to the database. Take a look at it. Yep, they're all good. Click accept.
No, not to that. Now in the script, there's parts of the script that clean things and standardize things, but no, I'm not looking to see
So
if,
somebody could come in and enter Mickey Mouse at
sure,
whatever, and
yeah,
it would automatically go into the database.
yes, yeah. I mean, if that happened, yeah. Now, I think that I would probably be notified fairly quickly if, who knows? That could happen. At this point, I am not looking at every and reviewing every submission. I
Okay.
will by local officials. If it's by the public, it's going to be asked by a local official to review this public feedback. One thing I didn't mention yet is there are jurisdictions that are not interested in using the app. And we're not advertising this on the front end because, well, there's not really a need. But if someone has all the GIS data already and they're just like, hey, I have the data, I don't want to go and review every single record in my county. Can you just replace it? They can do that. But that's not like a fancy front end thing. That is them sending me the data. And basically, I send this, it's more of a fancy Excel spreadsheet that explains here's all the fields we have or we need from you. And they are supposed to paste their uh, attribute information in here, and then this will show them what they've done wrong or not. So it's not as clean, it's not as fancy and you know interfacey, but we do have a way of taking people's spatial data, and just wholesale replacing that category of critical infrastructure in the database, but we do require them to have the schema in a way that will make our life not too difficult. So I know that some of these fields are not how people organize their data. And so I know it's not going to be like they're not, I know that that people aren't going to be necessarily thrilled with having to organize some of their data in the way that we need it organized, but it's kind of the compromise that we've come up with.
Have you taken a look at an automated crosswalk? So
Uh,
that they register it once for their facility and thereafter it automatically crosswalks in the future.
I know I haven't. That sounds like a great plan. I haven't.
Again,
Uh,
that's
yeah.
over at the underground utilities project has done that because
Okay.
we can't have 2,000 and 200 utilities going through and rearranging their data to conform
Right.
to what the attribute lineup is going to be inside the system.
Right.
So there's a registration, and we could potentially look at copying that over in a way that would make it usable on this project. So that,
Yeah. So could you send? Is that a link then I would go to somewhere or?
yeah, no, I'll connect back to you.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay.
it's the development team over at that project.
Oh, okay.
They can talk you through on it.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions?
You said that you ask counties that you contract with to review the data. Do you do that yearly or is it that every 5 years?
That's typically every 5 years.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't be. Yeah. Is that right, Stacy? I think that's correct.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yep.
Thanks.
Um. Yeah. And again, like this is really all for. This is hazard mitigation focused. Like it helps our workflow. That's and everyone involved in the process. So that's why it was like that was the impetus of like creating something that was easier for just anyone to look at and use. But because, yeah, like you've all heard and are aware, there was a need of like, well, let's share this data with the state, especially the fire station and law enforcement. Um, it is a side benefit um, that I'm glad we can do. And I feel like it's going to be done even better moving forward, just with some of the ways we're able to track and update records that we haven't been able to do previously. So, yeah.
Zach, are you able to make these available as feature services, like as REST endpoints? So I realize I'm probably not like the larger majority of the users, but I think my preferred way to review these would probably be just to bring them into my own Arc Pro project
Yeah, that's a
and
good
compare them with what I have.
question. Right. Yeah, so what you're describing, Matt, is like if you were to receive this request, is there a way to get the data in that format? Is that what you're like as a REST endpoint?
Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
yep. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking that the way that it's all I'm trying to think. So running with that idea, if you did find something that needed to be updated, would you then just directly edit the record?
I think
Like,
my thought was that I would just use that as a visual comparison, and then if I found something, I would
mm,
come out to this
I see.
web tab
Okay.
that we have and make the edit there.
Sure, sure. I don't see why we couldn't do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that seems like that would work
yeah,
well.
no, that does. That's a good point. And as a visual, like you were saying, there's no reason that couldn't happen. Uh, and where I was going with my thought was that the editing would still have to either it would still have to happen through the survey or a wholesale replacement with, someone sending their spatial data with the schema that we have asked them to update. But yeah, I don't see why visual that we couldn't do that. That's a
Yeah,
good
just
point.
lock down the editing and just make it play.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I guess we assume that a lot, a lot of the counties we work with wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. I mean, maybe that's changing now. Um, a lot of counties don't
Well,
have GIS folks that would, but
well, oh,
that's
sorry, Stacy,
changing.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just I wanna I wanna run with this idea a little bit. So was it just because you use GIS often, Matt, that it would be kind of you're more comfortable like having this in Pro or something and opening the attribute table type thing? Is
Oh,
that
yeah, and I mean, I have my own versions of these same layers, right? That we
right
have
to
locally,
compare?
and for any given
Yeah.
topic, I may have actually put some work into it in the last couple years, and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily reflected those same edits out to what you have or anywhere else.
True. Yeah. Okay. I like this. Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's good feedback.
Yeah, that seems like that would be really easy to do. Just share a read-only view
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay.
of all of it. Because that is essentially what we're doing in our applications. It's just that yeah, you need to be able to pull it into your application. So good idea, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions or feedback? Oh, Sally. Yeah. Sorry. Now I'm seeing hands raised. I didn't see any of these before. So sorry.
Hey, no worries. No worries. First of all, that was an interesting question that Matt asked because we are going to be asking counties to review some public lands, a subset of the parcels. Sorry, I'm going a little sideways with this, but one of the things I insisted on is that they have an opportunity to view the data
Mm.
because I would be the same way. I'd want to be able to bring it into my own system and look at it and
Sure.
compare it and all
Yeah.
those things so I can understand that. So interesting how these things inform one another. But I have a couple of questions really about participation. So you're saying you like ask counties, did I hear every 5 years to go in and review these data points?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
And I don't know
counties,
if sorry, I just
no,
wanted to say, let me turn on my camera so I'm not so um I'm not sure, Zach, are we revisiting counties that we did 5 years ago? I'm not sure if we've actually had this for 5 years, so that's why it's a little hard to say like
Um,
systematically that we're
yeah.
going every 5 years. But
No, it hasn't been around that long.
yeah,
yeah,
Like,
so
yeah. So,
that's the frequency of the plan update. So that's the frequency
I
theoretically that we
see.
would ask them
Sure,
to do this. Yeah.
sure. So it aligns, is that kind of a rolling schedule? You do
yeah,
so many updates
exactly.
every 5 years. I
Yep.
mean, that makes a ton of sense,
Yep.
right? So they would be kind of the priority, right? So I'm curious about how many counties do you do this with all counties or a subset of the counties? And how good of participation do you get?
I don't
Are
remember
there
exactly
some
what
counties?
percentage of the state would you say, Stacy?
Yeah, I'd say we've asked about 2/3 of the state for their data
Okay,
at this point.
And I would
Um,
say all of them have participate. I mean, all of them
good.
do
That's good.
review and yeah, but I'm more
More than
interested.
I expected to hear.
I
Yeah.
mean, some take a lot more, it's not, takes a while for some to actually get around to it, but
Course,
I understand
sure.
everyone's busy.
But they don't ignore you.
No,
I mean, that's
because
the opposite
no.
end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, some counties have vendors and they'd have to pay
Right.
the vendor and, there's all kinds of scenarios. I get that. But I was just wondering just kind of on average.
Yeah. Well, again, and my hope is because we learned that when we first set this up, we were using like Esri's creation and edit date stamp fields, which
Mhm.
kind of, it didn't work out as well, because we had to often run scripts that would then just mass update all the edit date field would just be meaningless because everything was being updated.
Not
Like
just
if
on the same day at the same
right,
time.
and
Yeah.
so we didn't have a good way of really tracking when was this edited by the user. So now we've actually built that into it. So we have a reserved like unique field that only edits a date stamp when a user does something. So we'll have better kind of summaries that we could run moving
Understanding
forward.
metrics about when things were actually updated and
Right,
things like that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, this is super interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with
Yeah.
us. It's a nice piece of work.
Well, it's definitely, yeah, it was a team effort.
I think
My
Steve and Matt
Steve,
still have questions too.
oh, sorry. Yeah, of course.
I didn't have a question. I just lowered my hand. Sorry.
Oh.
You're going to have to go sit in the corner, Matt.
And I just
Um,
shared a link just so everyone knows to it because it's nice. If you wouldn't mind though, not submitting to anything right now because I have to clean up things because it's actually live now, but you can still play around with it.
Yeah. So what I was going to, kind of pass along here as a general comment. If you saw Megan's comment earlier about the PSAPs, and then Sally talking about needing to collect information for their approach, I think the reality is that you are sufficiently well ahead of any of those other efforts that there might be some way to do a discussion about flipping the circumstance on its head, where this becomes, if you will, the state focus, which would give you the opportunity to do the outreach more universally. And then, for instance, in the circumstance where the U of M has the need to get a hold of the data for doing these mitigation plans, you draw data from yourself, if you will. And the PSAPs can draw from this app and so on. I think the combination of the U of M and the state together would be a very powerful marketing approach in trying to get organizations and counties or whatever that otherwise might not feel a need to participate. The U of M, just that stamp on things, I think tends to be a very, as I said, powerful indicator to people that it's being done for something for the purposes of good.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage that as maybe kind of a takeaway to take a look at if there might be a way to encourage that discussion and build towards that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Exactly. I mean, that's been my hope, and you said it exactly. The the problem, I mean, you know this because we've been in meetings about this, but HSEM is still, they have other processes where they reach out to counties to ask them to update critical infrastructure in a variety of forms. And maybe Matt can give more specifics about this, but counties have been asked to update critical infrastructure in a spreadsheet, or they're asked to update data for this events application they have, and they have multiple ways of getting this data, and none of those ways are this way, which we've told them over and over exists.
I understand.
And yeah, so
I
it's
understand
just
with
like
great
super
detail,
maddening. Yeah,
but Stacy, I'm just trying to indicate here, I think
yeah.
that to move us away from this place where we've been stuck for so long, that just how far along this approach is, um, you know, moving towards a more refined and finished product will effectively, you know, how can you argue in the state that you're spending money to do something that's already been done? So
Hmm.
anyway,
Yeah, thanks. And
Megan,
Megan.
yep.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, Steve, and I can't offer that Mingio sends out, communications asking counties to give feedback. But what I could offer is at least reaching out to Mingio if you see a need for us to communicate out either via email or gov delivery to the community. Whether it's more of a broad reaching, gov delivery that goes out to all of our 2,000 subscribers on our newsletter, or if it's an email from our office that just goes out to the county GIS staff. So I just encourage you to reach out if you see opportunity for us to help you. But the HSM bit does make it more complicated, so no promises.
And I just saw Sally's your comment about wondering if we compared the Minnesota Department of Education data with Highfield's. We did not. No, we
I
didn't.
was just curious
Yeah. No,
because
yeah.
I feel like Department of Education that Mike
We did. Wait, I'm sorry. We
data
did.
is
Highfield
probably
is.
super good, and it's interesting that you weren't able to pull out the actual school location. I understand there's administrative buildings and things like that, but
Yeah. It
No,
was.
I don't know.
we've looked at it.
Yeah.
We've looked at it, Zach.
Okay.
I mean,
I can remember. Yeah.
yeah, and mostly this conversation, Matt Goodman and Mike Dolbo and I have had conversations about this. It's so there is a process for Highfield to get the MDE data, and for some reason it's broken. But now because we've updated so many of these counties, and
Yes,
like
yeah.
that our data is better in most cases anyway. So when Zach says we're using that as a base, we're only using it for the counties, maybe a third of the counties that didn't send us updates yet, if that makes sense. So
Mainly, I was thinking about just some evidence or some understanding or evidence about how dirty Highfield data is,
yeah,
basically,
Matt has some
right?
great evidence.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I have plenty of that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions or feedback?
I
Well,
just render one more comment. I'm
yeah.
impressed by the degree that as this application has been developed, that you're continuing to make the kind of progress you are. So kudos to yourself, Zach, and whoever else is working with you and Stacy on this project. It's very encouraging to see this.
Yeah, thanks. That Steve Graham's definitely been a huge part also uh of it, the development of it. So and others. I mean, it's definitely a team effort. So thank you. Yeah.
Could you
Okay.
show the sources again for?
Yeah. So in the top, that pane that opens.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah. So there's
Cool.
that sources. So
Thanks.
yeah.
I
And
second these remarks. This is great.
Yeah.
Zach, I'm sorry if you mentioned this at the beginning, but is there a place or what's downstream of this as far as making the data available? Or
Yeah. So at the moment, the only data sets that we make that are downstream outside of our workflow is the fire stations and law enforcement facilities. And I have to actually go ahead and update those data sets in the GeoCommons. Right now, it's still showing, it's pointing to the old version. Um, and so I have to actually go and update that. So, and what that actually looks like behind the scenes there are hosted feature layer views of the fire stations and law enforcement locations that are shared with the public. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And for all the other layers, you probably can tell where I'm going. If I were to start to use this
Yeah.
over the years, put time and energy into editing like dialysis facilities, for example, and then someday I suddenly need those,
Yeah.
um, it would be
Oh,
nice to, you know,
for sure. I
ultimately
mean, I
the way
think I
to
could
get.
speak that, of course, we would, if anyone, if you, Matt, needed it, we could just, of course, share it with you. I don't know if that's true for the public, the general public. I'd have to,
Yeah.
but definitely like collaborating with other GIS, officials
Yeah.
or others just that like reach out and like have a need for it for whatever reason. I don't see, usually we're very much willing to share that unless we can't for some reason.
Well, every county that we work with, we give them their data. So we basically clip out all of the data for their county that we've used in this process. And Zach, I don't know if you have the critical infrastructure dashboard handy for one of the counties, but
Um, oh, like
all like
in our hub site?
yeah,
I don't.
I can put a link in there, but like this, so each county has a county profile page, and the second dashboard down is the dashboard that all these data sets are reflected in their county. And so they hopefully will use the hub site as a viewer. They can use that for the next 5 years. But we also have a script to just clip all of those data out if they want to use them in their GIS programs as well. The ones that aren't available as web services to the public.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
a couple I mentioned earlier, that a couple counties have been prompted by HSEM to give them the latest fire stations in a spreadsheet. And then they've turned around and asked me, well, can you just export what we just did for you? And so we end up doing that for them. So that's working, I think.
Thanks for the hand clap, Matt.
Okay, I'm trying to be as dynamic as possible here.
Thank you. No, yeah, yeah. No,
Multiple forms of reinforcement.
thank
Great.
you. Yeah, it's been yeah. It's nice to finally get it out and start. Yeah, I'm curious. You always see like when you're so invested and involved in a project, like y- you know, y- it's interesting to see what people that aren't involved in this project start seeing right away, and I'm just curious how these the first requests are going to be taken that we're sending out to 21 counties right now that we're working with.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much,
yeah,
Zach.
yeah, of course.
Appreciate all your
All
work
right.
on this. He's worked really
Yeah.
hard, and Steve as well. So um yeah, it's great. So maybe we should just have a few other updates for this meeting. So Zach, if you need to drop off, you certainly can. But thanks again for the presentation.
All right. Good seeing you all. I'm gonna take off. Have a good
Thanks.
day.
Okay.
Nice
Thanks,
work.
Zach.
Bye. Thanks.
I just wanted to circle around and see if there were any updates, especially if either Sally or Megan, if you're able to give us a report on what happened. Oh, Megan wasn't there. She was also on vacation on the Geospatial Advisory Council meeting and the endorsement process, which we had for those of you who were not at the last meeting. We, as a group, the Critical Infrastructure Assessment group, we drafted up a first kind of cut of an endorsement process and what that would look like for data to go through that process for the Geospatial Advisory Council. And Allison Slatz took that and kind of cleaned it up and made it a little more general for all kinds of data, not just critical infrastructure, and then presented the idea to the Geospatial Advisory Council that that there should be a new work group to pursue this idea of endorsing data sets. And I was not there because I was on vacation. So I don't know if you have anything to share with us, Sally.
I guess it was it was an easy win, right? Everybody thought it was a great idea. Allison, of course, did a lovely job writing it up and invited people to participate. I'm not sure when those meetings are going to start. She's the one that's, I think, the ringleader, at least at first, unless somebody else wants to step up to do the organization. But we had heard, this data endorsement idea had been bubbling up, and on in a couple of different circles, a couple of different tables, and something that I know that she also has been very interested in. So, yeah, I mean, I think people were super supportive of the idea. The charter was, overwhelmingly approved. Not that we usually have too much dissent at those meetings, but yeah, I think everybody's on board now. Finding the time to do it, I guess, is always the bugaboo. But yeah, she's agreed to lead it. I'm sure she'll make sure something happens before the next GAC meeting, because she's not going to want to go in and say nothing has happened after it was approved. But you know how that is. Deadlines are powerful motivators, as I always say. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think people were super supportive. She tried to include, I know I don't have it in front of me. It is in the GAC agenda, has been posted though. It's in the agenda packet. The notes have not been posted, but the agenda packet was, and there's a charter and there's kind of a starting list of participants. Stacy, I'm guessing you are one of the people on that list. And, so, I mean, there's already kind of a core group that's ready to get started. So,
yeah, thanks. I was really happy to see that there were a couple of other new people.
Yeah, I feel like there's one or two other people that hopped on board, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
so I
can't either. But they weren't members of this group, and so that's great. There's some other interests. So.
Definitely some good momentum. And I know that she wants to spend some time learning from other states about their endorsement processes and, giving it a thorough vetting. So everybody's on board. And of course, the Geospatial Commons is going through its kind of rewrite right now. And I think people are interested in if there's a way that those endorsements could be identified on the Commons resources as we move forward. I'm sure all those conversations will dovetail at some point, but yeah, nice work. Yeah.
Thanks, Sally.
Sure.
Does anyone else have an update or something they want to share? The NISJIG Emergency Preparedness Committee, the one which is, it's a work group of the NISJIG, National States Geographic Information Council. They have another meeting coming up on this Wednesday, I believe, and the topic was going to be data collection post wildfire. I think they're doing like damage collection from wildfire events. So interesting, and maybe interesting to anyone on this group, but hopefully that work group can take a little bit of a turn to talk a little more on the preventative or the preparation side of emergency preparedness and geospatial data, which we haven't necessarily seen many presentations from that come out, but that work group, because you all participate in this work group, you are able to attend the those NISJIG work groups. Just let me know if you want to invite to that, because I think you need access.
As a side note, in case your folks would like to know about it, I had a long discussion with Nash Pearson with a Minnesota Civil Air Patrol, and they have at this point the Civil Air Patrol for Helena had done 40% of the damage assessment, and it's all being run through an application that FEMA has up and running that uses US National Grid to grid in the quad the area sized places that they're using to identify where damage has occurred. I didn't describe that very well, but I think you get the gist of it. Yeah.
Wow, that would be really interesting to see, down the road after the emergency's over, just how they handled that at that scale.
Well,
Cool.
he had a funny commentary, and I actually took a screenshot of it for a meeting I've got coming up, where they reversed lat long down in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, which made the equivalent of what you were looking at as being in South America. So it's like minus 80 something, and then the latitudes then displayed. So it isn't do you understand what I'm saying? The running position of your cursor in their system is showing the position,
Oh,
the latitude, longitude, positional references reversed. So for instance, it's showing minus 80, which is in South America, and plus.
in their application?
Yes.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So anyway, they're putting in a change request, but just indicative of programmers don't get this. Anyway.
All right. Well, that's really all I had prepared for today. The next steps will be we're going to be publishing that fire station data again, as Zach mentioned, with the newest, the data that's, the new application in the metadata, but then also the latest cut of the data on the GeoCommons. And then I'm hoping that there will be some movement on the endorsement work group, and we can start to look at that fire station data and how it would fit into that process, and if there's anything we need to do with that. I still have on my list, Megan, to maybe meet with you to talk about the critical infrastructure web page, because that's been hanging out there for a while, and I think we need to do something. So that would be great. Any other announcements?
No, that sounds good about the website. I do have a question about the Minnesota Situational Awareness Viewer. So how does the data in this application, I'll put the link in the chat, relate
Oh, Megan, you just
data?
asked the $1,000,000 question. So Steve and I have been meeting about this, and I think there's definitely a desire to align the data sets. I don't think all the data sets on the page would necessarily be reflected in this application, and vice versa. But the ones that are the same, for instance, hospitals, should be the same source. And so Steve and I have made some progress on that. I believe. But yeah, that application was built by sorry,
Share Geo, we
Share
built it and
Geo.
yeah, we
Yes.
donated. So if I could,
Yes.
I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole. I thought I would first send it to Stacy, but Megan, what she's alluding to, and if I can steal a screen for a minute, I think I can, maybe.
Should be able to. Yep.
So what we're working on is in the background. If you can see that, just trying to first of all figure out the structure of how to think about what we're calling critical infrastructure. And then as you get into each item, thinking about how to consider that item, like what's a hospital? Does it, because in like some data sets, Highfield is an example, psychiatric hospitals are broken out differently than trauma centers and so on. And you've heard some allusion to that. But again, Megan, all I'm trying to do is give you comfort on just spraying this up on the screen here. I was just about to email it to Stacy to say, to continue our discussion on how we align these two things, we're going to have to first work through this kind of list to get, if you will, a template going forward of how we're going to do this. So is that helpful or not?
Yeah, it is definitely. Is there a need for both of these applications, or would the critical infrastructure one from the U of M suffice?
Oh, I think with the objective here is to get down to one. I
Okay.
think that's where we want to be, don't you?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the critical infrastructure application you saw today is really just showing, it's really just an application in order to obtain verification from,
Right.
yeah. And so it's not a viewer
Yeah.
that's meant to be used in a situation where you can turn on and off layers and that sort of thing. So, and that's more where Steve, the viewer that Steve just shared, can be used, by entities that need to customize their view. But yeah, there is something in the future here that would be more of an alignment on that.
That makes sense. Thanks.
All righty. Well, thank you all for attending, and appreciate your input as always. Great to see you all at the conference.
Likewise. Thank you, Stacy. This is great.
We'll be talking to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, you guys.
Bye.